Welcome to Abaddon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Abaddon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 126 of the podcast, we are talking with Dr. Claire Fearn. Claire recently defended her dissertation, working with parents, guardians to provide support and knowledge for structured literacy spelling instruction at home. That's the title. She used her dissertation as an opportunity to attack a problem of practice and enact change. And she found some interesting results. So I was excited to co-chair this committee with Dr. Christy Livingston, and I'm excited that Claire was willing to come on the podcast and talk about what she did and what she found. This was outside of my comfort zone a little bit, and talking about structured literacy, science of reading, and just learning a little bit about how Claire has evolved as a teacher. As you're going to find out, we have some history in our relationship throughout her education here at the University of Mississippi, and I'm so proud of what she's done, but then I'm also just excited for what is to come for her. With, when you do a dissertation, one of the things I like to say is it's not an ending. It's like, it is a beginning. You're becoming a steward of the profession. You're finding a niche of the world that you've learned a lot about, but then you know that there's so much more to learn, and then you won't need to share that information you found. You need to steward it, really steward that knowledge, keep acquiring more, and then sharing it with the world. And I'm excited for what Claire is going to be doing in the future as Dr. Claire Fearn. So without further delay, here is my conversation with Dr. Claire Fearn. Dr. Claire Fearn, welcome back to Abaddon Planet. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You remember we talked about fish?
I know, a
That was
while ago.
like
I think
episode
5 years.
16.
I think that was during quarantine, wasn't it?
I
Way back when?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I
It was
think it
way
was,
back when.
I think it was in my little makeshift teaching office during quarantine that I had to make.
Yeah, that was like after, I think, the first year when I was doing one a month, because that's all I could afford with my plan. I didn't have unlimited like uploads. I was like on the cheapest plan available. And then so it took a while to get that first year, and then like we started really, really rolling.
Oh, yeah, you've been cranking them out now.
Yeah, relatively. Yeah. But actually that was going back to Tom Andrews. I had that conversation with him about fish, because he actually went to the Seattle,
Mhm.
the fit, Pike's Place fish
Yes.
market. And then we
Since
talked
then,
about,
I've actually been there too. So,
yeah, hey, it lines up, right?
yeah.
They're having a good time, and everybody wants to see them. And there's another fish market down the place, not quite as fun.
Yeah, it's very crowded. It was,
Yes.
we actually stopped by there walking home from the Taylor Swift concert when it was
Wow,
completely
humble brag.
empty. They got a nice little selfie with the Pike's Place, without 20,000 other people in the
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. So you as we some people are like, well, who is Claire? Let's answer it. Who is Claire? Can you share a little bit about yourself, Claire, for those that are not familiar with Dr. Claire Fearn?
Sure. I'm Claire Fearn. I am, I guess, originally from the Chicagoland area and came down to Ole Miss for undergrad. Stuck around for my master's and was actually your GA during my master's program.
Grad assistant,
Um,
for those that are unaware. Yep.
yes, sorry, GA grad assistant. And then I started teaching here in Oxford once I graduated with my master's and stuck around. And then few years after teaching, started my doctorate journey and have recently defended and have now, I guess, full circle through all of the degrees at Ole Miss that you can probably get, unless I want to go in a different field. But
Yeah. Yeah, we've had some full circle moments, and thinking about like you when you were at my GA and going into your first teaching job, you
Mhm,
that summer were babysitting some of my kids, and actually like basically held a summer camp
mhm.
at my house with all the different activities that you were doing. And then you got that job and that first roster. Was Annie at the top of your first roster?
Yes,
My
I think
Yeah.
she was the first student.
There you go. And then you had to talk to her and like, hey, you're gonna have to call me Ms. Rierick. And she's like, well, you're gonna have to call me Annabelle. And like,
Mhm.
and she was Annabelle for that whole year. That was
Yep.
Some kids still call her Annabelle just because that they had her in
Really
class that one year. So that was kind of funny.
funny. We both had to relearn how to, yeah, address each other
That's right. That's right.
in the
Um,
class.
well, and thinking about so, getting the degrees that you did and then deciding to go into a doctor and the specific doctorate, you got the EDD, which is really focused in on being become a scholar practitioner. It's a Carnegie program for the education doctorate, really focusing on problems of practice. And there's something there that you wanted to attack. And it was like that first, at the end of that first year when we started talking about, okay, what's the problem you wanted to attack? Like, so what led you to get the doctorate? And two, what led you to that problem?
So I really started with, I was teaching third grade reading at that time, and we have, the reading gate is the big end of the year school test where all the students have to pass it in order to be promoted to fourth grade.
Hmm.
And I remember, just feeling for my students who were really struggling with reading, I was felt almost like I was failing them because I didn't feel as prepared to teach kids how to read. Um, I knew, how to teach comprehension strategies and how, once you could read fluently, I could lead you to comprehension. But I really struggled with the basic phonics approaches and understanding really everything that goes into how a child learns to read. And so I started researching myself and realized, had was introduced to the science of reading, and um, it really just opened up a passion inside of me. And I got really excited about it and wanted to learn more. And so after talking with a partner teacher, we both had some very passion projects that we were kind of interested in and decided together that we would pursue the EDD because neither one of us were quite ready to leave the classroom. And we knew that we wanted to better educate ourselves to better our teaching and to help all of our students. And so that's kind of what started with it. So then my first year, I was just learning a lot about science of reading and structured literacy. And, I kind of focused more on helping teachers understand structured literacy. And then after meeting with Dr. Livingston, that's really where I started honing in on spelling instruction. And that kind of led to this last year of really honing in on the problem of what I was looking at.
Well, let's go back a little bit. So like we'll talk more about we'll get towards the project in a sec, but like thinking about when I think about like how I learned to read and like I remember maybe a lot of like memorizing books or something like just and maybe that's where a lot of adults are going like well it just happened, right? It just
Mhm.
happened. Or like
Yep.
there might be like I remember seeing like I had a C book and an A book and then eventually a T book and then like all of a sudden like wow, cat. I knew cat. I don't know for some reason like in first grade or something. But I have no idea how it happened, but I love to read, and it's been a I identify as a reader, and
Yep.
so I'm just like what when you're talking to others, like talking to teachers, or even like going back into your own development as someone who's now a reading teacher, even though I wanted you to be a math instructor, that's okay, it's okay, I've forgiven, but thinking about like what do we need to know about like what is like that the difference maybe in maybe how we learn versus like what you're seeing as a teacher.
Yes. Well, and I mean, even myself, I was kind of the same way of I remember I didn't really learn how to read till second grade. I grew up with a speech impediment that really affected my reading development, and I definitely kind of was taught the whole language, which involved a lot of memorizing words, just memorizing sight words and just drill and practice of just memorizing words until it all kind of flew together and you just kind of guessed on words until you got them right.
Like sight
Uh,
words, so it's almost like flashcard almost
yep.
awareness of words like oh that is the I
Yeah.
recognize that's the okay, yeah.
And I remember picking up Magic Treehouse books in second grade, and because I was the youngest, and so my siblings were all reading, chapter books, and I wanted to read so bad. And the only word I knew was the, and I literally would go through the whole page, and every time I saw the, I'd read it out loud. And I just pretended to be reading the whole
Yeah, yeah.
time, just looking for that one word that I knew. Whereas, now we know that's not how you're supposed to be approaching teaching kids how to read, that's memorizing words is not going to be effective. And I mean, and even if adults were taught the phonics approach, now that we're all, or now that they're mastering the language and know how to read, you don't remember the struggle of sounding out words or any,
Hmm.
just know, oh, it just clicked one day. It all just, magically clicked and I know how to read now. Um, and so, adults struggle with, well, I don't really remember how I learned to read because it was
Right.
just um, once those neural pathways, started flowing, they started flowing and um, you don't really remember it. But the whole language approach was definitely very common in my generation, which then moved into more of a balanced literacy, which is kind of what my undergrad kind of was. And when I started teaching, balanced literacy was pretty big.
So it was a
And
mix of what you're talking about, the science of reading, but then also the whole language, like balance
yes,
between those two.
so
Okay.
yeah, so balanced literacy was kind of like, oh, well, we're going to teach whole language, but we're going to throw in some phonics there too. But it didn't have the sequential systematic phonics approach that that science of reading deems as necessary. And so it wasn't a good mix of both. It just
Hmm.
didn't reach all students. The students who could learn through that learned, but the students who struggled struggled and no one was there to support them.
Yeah.
Um, so, it kind of helped, it didn't help. It created this gap between students who could read and students who could not. Whereas the science of reading really showcases that, 95% of students can learn how to read um, through that approach.
Yeah. So using, again, talking about science, look at research based structures and a lot, and I've learned a lot and through your project on different vocabulary and things like that on like, wow, how the different things are broken down. It kind of reminds me of like when we talked about cognitively guided instruction in math, like thinking like, okay, here's a pathway to go through the complexities of joining two numbers together, where it's counting on, where there's modeling, and then like moving on through invented strategies to, okay, now they just know, you just know. And it's like again, developing those pathways to where it's really hard to understand, like back in the day of like when you just had flashcards and you just memorizing things like, yeah, I know that 5 + 6 is 11, but I don't understand it as two fives and a one, or I don't understand it as one more than 10 and one less than 12. Like I don't have all that. I just know that almost like memorization,
Mhm.
versus like actually having the understanding and the pathway in order to get to what that result is. It seems like
Yeah.
there, I don't know. Is that kind of parallel a little bit?
It is definitely parallel, and that's kind of where structured literacy comes in, is it's creating that explicit instruction of the phonics skills so that students understand why words are pronounced this way or why when we're spelling a word we're going to use this pattern, instead of just memorizing. And so when hear the word spoil, oh, I know I'm going to be using oi because it's in the middle of the base word,
Hmm.
whereas in the word toy, that oi sound is at the end. I'm going to use oy. um, and so understanding the reasoning behind that is kind of, that's, basically the same thing with the math cognitive approach. So, um, but yes, but otherwise, if you're just memorizing the words, you just say, oh, well, in spoil, I use OI because I just do.
Yeah.
That's just how the word spoil. You don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Like, and again, not just, again, just it's the world I know. Like we have all these people that want to just, hey, just teach the algorithm. Don't make it complicated. Just teach the algorithm versus like, well, no, we want them to have the understanding behind it. So when the algorithm breaks down, they still have an understanding of like making sense of it and like, oh, I could figure out how to pronounce this word even though I've never seen it before in my life. I could probably figure out how to read it. And so
Mhm,
I like that. So
mhm.
the title of your dissertation was working with parents guardians to provide support and knowledge for structured literacy spelling instruction at home. There we go. So we kind of got an idea of what structured literacy is basically what we just were talking about, correct? And
The
then
how, like the instruction of the science of reading. So the science of reading is basically, all of the literature that states how a child's brain learns to read. And structured literacy is the approach of using that knowledge
Got it.
to actually teach
I'm
kids how to read.
still learning. This is good. And then, but okay, so that's a big umbrella, all that
Mhm.
science, right? And then thinking
Yes.
about the how, and
hmm
then you selected to focus in on spelling. Why
Yes.
spelling?
So spelling is, in my opinion, not a hot topic, but it's been one of those things where schools don't want to get rid of it, but they also don't really want to give it time and energy.
Mm,
Uh, and so, and it's also the area where I feel like parents feel that they can help their child the most. When they
yeah,
get a list of spelling words, they know, oh, got this. We're going to memorize these words and you're going to get 100 on that spelling test on
yeah,
Friday. Guaranteed A every single week on something.
that's right.
Uh, and I remember in third grade, we would give spelling tests, I think, bi-weekly. And I just felt, I was like, okay, well, I'm just giving this list. I'm not teaching it in the classroom. I'm still assessing it. Where's the benefit coming from
Mm.
with this? Um,
So a
and
connection home,
mhm,
a part of the curriculum. It's something you're going to have attention to every week.
yes,
It's like, hey, and it seems like an underused resource.
yes.
That's what it kind of felt like.
Uh-huh. So then when I moved to second grade, we were really utilizing the spelling words because we were explicitly teaching phonics. And so they coincided with the spelling words for that week. And so it was more purposeful at that point. I wasn't just sending home a list and assessing it. We were utilizing it every day. We were practicing the skills. However, I was still sending home a list and assessing it on Friday. So I never really understood if the children knew the skills or if they just memorized the words.
Mm.
Uh, and so this past year, we still sent home a list, but we had 4 mystery words every week that were not on the list that used the skill to see if children were really learning the
Oh,
skill or not. And that was really helpful because it was insightful to see were they just memorizing the words or were they understanding the phonics and spelling patterns.
well, and also
Uh,
too, Claire, we're the parents. I mean, when you're just sending the list home before, I mean, parents aren't reinforcing what you're doing, right?
no,
You
because
know,
they
at
don't,
all.
unless they're a reading teacher as well, they don't understand how to, or they struggled with what phonics instruction looks like. How am I
Yeah,
supposed to be teaching this effectively? And so they would just rely on those memorization techniques of, oh, just
right.
write those words 3 times, write
Use
them
them
in,
in a sentence. Yeah,
use them in a sentence, tell me what they mean, or even if they wanted flashcards, jumping them out, you can get creative with, you can do
yeah.
lots of fun, creative things for memorization practices, but in the long run, it's just memorization. It's not utilizing the skill or retaining it,
Yeah.
which is a big thing of structured literacy spelling is that it's actually orthographically mapping the words into the child's brain, rather than just memorizing that one specific word. You're memorizing a skill that you can apply to hundreds of words.
So was that OI skill that you said was that a skill?
Yes, yes. So
What's an
that is
example of another one too?
So you can do, I mean, really any of the vowel teams would be one, or even Magic E, Sneaky E,
What's
is what,
Magic E? Tell
so
me.
so I call it Magic E. There's several other different names for it.
Yeah.
But so for example, if you have the word cap, you have
Okay.
CAP, like a cap.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Add an E at the end. You don't hear that E, but it's making the long vowel say its name. So it becomes cape.
Ah,
Uh,
yes.
and so that's, a rule that you would explicitly teach. And I always,
Magic E.
you always drew a little arrow. That's why I'm doing the little movement. We
Yeah.
would draw an arrow pointing to the A, and A would say its name, say its name. Uh, you would know that it would be cape. And that's the magic E. And
There you
so
go.
that's another skill that you could explicitly teach
Nice.
uh, and assess on as well.
Do they all have something have to do, oh shoot, now I'm forgetting the band with Beyonce originally.
Oh, Destiny's Child.
Destiny's Child. Any other Destiny Child connections to the other rules or
Oh, no, but I
no?
mean, it sticks with them. And so, and it's
Yeah,
funny
yeah.
because months later, after you teach that skill or whatever, they'll be reading something or writing something. I'm like, oh, well, there's the magic E. And they're like, oh, yeah, you will say its name, say its
That's awesome. So so what did you do then? I mean, for those that don't know, I mean, I was obviously a part of your committee, but what did you do with your take? Okay, so that we have a underutilized
Mhm.
instructional thing that's tied in with, especially in the second grade, it's tied in with structured
Yes.
literacy, with what you're trying to do with teaching these skills. Then okay, and but still the lists are going home, and
Mhm.
maybe parents, if they're in the know, that then maybe they're doing some of these skills, but probably not. So
Yes.
what did you decide to do?
So I decided, part of my dissertation was to look at providing parents and guardians with a scripted spelling homework so that they would be provided a piece of paper, or I made it digital as well, but that would write out word for word, this is what you say to your child, to kind of help them practice a lot of the structured literacy components, and so that children were having those skills reinforced at home. So the same thing we would do in the classroom, I basically was sending home for parents and guardians to use at home. So they were just getting repeated practice in a structured literacy way, rather than just sending home a list and saying, test is on Friday. Or even just, because I know some teachers will be like, oh, well, I can explain the rule and skill. And that's great too, and that is helpful. But even just explaining the rule or skill is not helping the parents and guardians understand how to help their child with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so, I just was really explicit and just kind of created this script that they can go through different steps, um, and learn basically what structured literacy is, as well as how to help their child with their spelling.
So then, and yeah, and knowing you sent home the script, but then you would send a survey, and again, you knew that it
Mhm.
was a part of a study, you did IRB,
Yes.
and all that good stuff, and then deciding to okay, not just sit on your laurels and be like, all right, that's what it is, and send
Mhm.
back, like using improvement science techniques, which is about
Yes.
iterative improvement over time, and trying to think like, how do you make this thing better? You offered survey questions that then allowed for improvement. And so what were some of the things over, so again, the goal being for parents to be educated about what these things were, right? And for the students to use those skills and learn those skills. And so, what are some things that you did to improve what you sent home for parents to use with the kids?
Yes. So I use PDSA cycles, which is the Plan, Do, Study, Act. Um, and
Dean
which
Rock
is
is going to be
actually,
so happy. He's going to be so happy.
which, I understood the benefit of from actually Dean Rock's course that I took that fall. And that really solidified how I wanted to go through this study. And it actually works out because our school district does improvement science as well. So it is something that, is really heavy in our district. And so I used that to basically every week I sent home a script and the survey. And then when the students brought it back on Friday, I would read through those scripts, type out all the comments that parents or guardians left. And based off that feedback, as well as how the children did on the spelling test, especially those mystery words, I would revamp the script. So I would either adopt, or abandon components of the script based off of that week's feedback. And so, like, for example, the first week's script was, it involved a lot of components of structured literacy, which looking back, I was like, yeah, that was a terrible way to start. But hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, yeah,
And so all the parents and guardians were like, whoa,
yeah. Way too much.
way too much. And so I was like, okay, yep, let's scale this way back and let's start with the basics of blending and segmenting and helping parents and guardians understand what blending and segmenting is. instead of diving into blending, segmenting, heart words, and all these different components.
Yeah.
And so then each week, yeah, we just revamped it and changed things and tried to simplify as much as I could because I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I want to give you all this information and all this knowledge. But you have to realize that parents and guardians are coming in not knowing much, and that can be very overwhelming. And so I really, it was really helpful to simplify and hone in on what's really important. And so really narrow down key components of what was necessary in each weekly script, which was really helpful.
Well, and also to think about what's something that they're going to want to do, right? And was the game a part of what you originally did?
No. So that was added on. I forget which week it was added on. I would have to look back. But I I added it on just to see, and I kind of talked it up when I was passing it out to all the students. I was like, okay, this week's there's a game. It's really exciting. Let me know how you feel about it. And so even, I didn't really collect students' perspectives. I was mostly focused on the parents and guardians.
Right.
But when the students were turning them in, they were just, oh, I loved the game. I was so excited about the game. Like, put a game on next week. And so that was, they really enjoyed that. Um,
So they're
and
games that they would be using the skill within the
mhm,
game.
yes. So it was a lot of, which the program we used is UFly. And so they have a roll and read in their curriculum. So I would use that. And then I
That's
would
the
do
University of Florida Literacy
the
Instruction
Literacy Institute.
Institute. There you go. Okay.
Yes. And all of their resources are free on the internet,
Hey,
which
we'll put a link in the show notes.
uh-huh. So it's very useful. And so I would use their roll and read, and then sometimes I would do um, lucky squares, especially if I wanted to have them practice like writing, or I would do a roll and spell for certain rules. So they would roll, a dice, and then they would have to spell, you know, if I was practicing a certain skill that I could kind of make it easy in a column, and they could just practice with different blends in the beginning, or for example, like if I was doing oi, whereas OY at the end or OI in the middle, I would have that in a column, and then in each box underneath, it would have maybe a different first consonant or something that they would have
Yeah.
to add. Would I use OY in the middle, or I mean OI in the middle or OY at the end, to apply that skill? And then they would have it. It was a game that they would do with their parent or guardian or older sibling. And so they really loved that interaction with their parents, and their parents really liked it too. Just
Well,
because it was something engaging that wasn't just
a
write your
game to
spelling.
play together, but then they're still learning
Mhm.
learning like how to helping their kid by playing a game together, which I think
Yes.
is like, I mean, we're a game family. I know you're a game house as well.
Yes.
And that like, hey, that's good time spent together, enjoying each other, but then also you're learning something too at the same time.
Exactly. And it was something, and it's homework. The game, especially later on, the game incorporated both skills or both rules from that week. And so, it was something that you could do. I know, families are busy and they've got cheer practice on certain days or whatever, but you could dedicate, one day a week to, hey, let's play the game this day. Um,
And that's what some adjustments you did make too, is like, hey, like I can't do all this throughout the week. I've got to like
yes.
one day. And so those are some adjustments you made as well, right?
Yes. And that was all based off the feedback that parents and guardians were giving me on the surveys, and which was, really helpful. And so I was able to kind of just, instead of divvying it up by day, it was more by step. And so you could do those steps however you wanted throughout the week. Um, so that was definitely more beneficial, I think, for the parents and guardians, especially during the spring craziness.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing where, hey, there's soccer games going on, there's baseball going on, there's a lot of stuff going on. This is a very active town with lots of different things.
Yes.
But the question probably people are asking is like, well, did it work?
Hmm. So I did a pre-test, post-test, before all of the spelling scripts. And it definitely was found that the students who were receiving the scripted spelling homework definitely improved on their overall spelling abilities. And actually, it was when I was looking at their spelling stages and how they improved. So typically throughout a school year, one spelling stage increase was deemed relatively, appropriate.
And this is a unit part of structured literacy, right? These stages
Yes.
that they've kind of established. And so you're saying over 1 year, you usually
Mhm.
get 1 unit of growth on
Yes.
this
Hmm.
scale. And what did you
Yes.
find?
So I found that in the 9 week, which is a quarter of the school year,
That's right. We love fractions.
the unit the same, um, that they grew over one whole skill. So in a quarter of the time, they were growing the equivalents of basically a year's worth.
Which is
Uh,
pretty cool. That's
yes,
pretty cool.
yes. And that's even with, parents and guardians that weren't completing every single week's script too,
Yeah.
you know. And so that just goes to show just how powerful home reinforcement and the relationship between a teacher and a parent and guardian is.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that when parents and guardians feel heard, that they're going to do more for that teacher and that school. Um, I think that relationship is a really powerful relationship that sometimes isn't utilized as much as
Yeah.
it should, or we're unsure of how to build that relationship. Um, And so, I think parents and guardians really saw how they would write a comment and I would change something based off that comment the next week. So
Yeah.
they were like, oh, she's listening to me. She understands like this is too much or I can't get everything done. And I think that that really helped, uh, them feel like, okay, I want to keep doing this with my child. But not even, the growth is great, but parents and guardians too felt that they learned a lot throughout those 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Uh, and that they felt way more confident using structured literacy approaches, moving forward, which
Yeah.
was another one of my goals of, you know, wanting, because the UFly program, the University of Florida Literacy Institute has homework pages for parents and guardians, but um, if you're not super knowledgeable in structured literacy, they can be very confusing. And
Yeah, there's
so,
not a lot of support around. Like I
uh,
saw some of there was like, okay, you need some hand holding, and
yeah,
that's what I think is great, Claire, is like you're eliminating barriers for parents that are eager to wanting to help. Parents want their kids to be able to read, right? And like giving them, here's something, something you're familiar with, spelling words, but we're providing these skills, providing it in, because you talk about providing it in different languages for kids, like, like if the home language is a little bit different, like, hey, here's still some of these scripts. And then also, the digital stuff. And even if like you're talking about the roll and read, like if they don't have a dice, hey, here's a digital dice you can go I mean, I like that. Just eliminating barriers to participate in this thing. And you're calling it homework, but really it's work that's done at home with somebody else, right? And like that's
yes.
that's what's kind of neat.
Well, it's not homework as in the sense of just repetitive task.
Yeah, yeah.
It is reinforcement of a skill that is explicitly taught in
Right.
school and is just giving students some extra practice in that skill. Students aren't teaching themselves at home. They're not learning anything new through this. It's just reinforcement of something that they learned in school.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that and that's been proven to be extremely uh, beneficial is the need for reinforcement, especially with these foundational skills of reading and writing. It has to be constantly reinforced. It takes a lot of brain power to learn how to read and write. Um, once you learn it, it's a whole different ball game. But learning it is very, very difficult, and it's a struggle, and it requires a lot and a lot of practice. And so knowing, helping parents and guardians understand how to help their child practice it is very important. Um, because, that's kind of that, especially K through second grade is that vital stage of all these foundational skills, that, if they don't learn, it gets really difficult later
Yeah.
on for
Yeah.
them. So
And
it
so,
is definitely a
so
need.
make, I mean, in hindsight,
Mhm.
it made so much sense to like, hey, I mean, I just got done watching the NBA finals, and like an underutilized resource is that, that person on the bench that can come out and give you some rebounds and stuff like that. Like, here's an underutilized that can come in, like the
Mhm.
spelling thing. We put it out there, it gets some minutes, but how can we really maximize its use? And you've done that, and you like thinking about, okay, this is something maybe that parents will spend time on because it's something they're familiar with. But now let's add some instruction around it that's going to reinforce the things that we're doing rather than, just kind of almost reinforcing opposite habits than what you'd want to
Yes.
do. Uh, you know,
Yes.
so I don't know. It's kind of brilliant. No, it is
Yes.
brilliant. Let's just say it is brilliant.
It was really, I really enjoyed the process of it as well. Um, it was a lot of work each week making the scripts, and uh, but seeing the immediate benefit from it each week with students who were doing really well on the spelling test, and just gaining confidence in their spelling too was really, awesome to see. And so that itself was motivating. Um, as well as just, building relationships with the parents and guardians. And
Yeah.
it was a fun study.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I wish I was able to do it for longer, you know, like it would be something, and I'm excited, next year I feel like I can basically kind of continue doing it without,
Yeah.
really, but um it was very motivating to me to be like, okay, let's revamp spelling homework, and
Yeah.
let's, into next year with a different idea of what homework should look like.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something that is completely independently done by the student either. It can involve games, it can involve engagement with a parent and guardian, it can involve,
Which probably
other
was
components.
siblings too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I had a few that, and I even it was so cute. I had a few older siblings fill out the survey as well, like that week. Oh, I did it with my sibling, and I found this part fun, or this part was difficult for me. So even having, so that also tells me that the script was, an older child could read it and
Yeah.
understand it. Like not an adult could read it and
Right.
understand it.
Perfect.
Um, so that was also, beneficial to see too. Um, but also, understanding too that, yeah, some homes, a parent and guardian might not be home to do the homework. So what
Yeah.
is that going to look like? Um, but yeah, it was a very beneficial study, and um, I'm excited to kind of move forward and continue with it, I guess.
Yeah. And it just makes me think. So we talk about like what are the the takeaways that apply to teaching. One is just that responsive engagement with parents, guardians is awesome. Giving, hey, maybe letting them have a little fun with with the content, with the game, that gets more engagement. Uh,
Mhm.
what are some other things that you had that might apply to teaching, like just general lessons versus even specific to the study? You can go specific to the study as well.
Um, I guess, just, I mentioned it before, but just simplifying of just, starting slow with anything. And I know in the study, like I started with blending and segmenting, and I kept that skill with parents and guardians for weeks until they've understood what sound boxes were, and they understood, they're like, okay. And it gave me the sign of like, okay, they're ready to move on to a different strategy now.
Hmm.
Uh, Instead of just providing all of these resources at once. And I feel like a lot of times teachers are very eager to provide all these
Yeah.
resources. Or, anyone is, there are a ton of great resources out there, and we want to give them to people, but simplifying and, starting slow, and um, easing into it. I think building up was
Yeah.
a big thing I learned. through it of just, you know, it's okay to not hit everything at once at the
Yeah.
beginning. Build into it. And that's actually something that I'm starting next year of, okay, we're going to slowly ease parents and guardians into spelling homework instead of just throwing a structured literacy spelling approach at them and then being like, what am I supposed to do with
Yeah.
this? Um, and so, I think that when you're trying to work with parents and guardians, also just asking them and asking for feedback from them. I'm not sure if that is utilized as much as it could be.
Yeah.
Uh, I feel like a lot of times parents and guardians don't get to hear their voice and their opinions into the matter as much
Yeah.
unless you're having, parent conferences and
Right.
um but over homework especially, I feel like that's just kind of something that the teacher gives out and collects and um but I think that that's something that would be very interesting and beneficial is to kind of hear what do parents guardians like about homework, what do they not like about homework, especially because homework is such a big topic and very, I feel like there are a lot of people for it and a lot of people against
Yeah.
it in the elementary setting.
We talked
So,
about that term too. It's just like, is that, I mean, one, people identify, like people know what it is, but then also two, people are like, well, are we giving homework to second graders? Like, like that sort of thing. And I remember, as a kid, I was like, hey, I got homework. Like and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to have homework, like, and how do you, because there's a recognition, but then also at the same time, it, it's not like the kind of homework that we would get, like, I
yes.
guess it was just a different thing. So I don't
Mhm.
know. It, there was the debate continues on that. So
Yes. I think it'll be forever,
yeah.
forever debate.
So
Um,
I mean, so we had like, and I have this question: what would be a major critique of this work? It's not the critique. Maybe it's the like what is more like the power of what you did with regards to spelling and like the teaching the skills and the the instruction kind of you're sending home and the things that they were able to engage with and seeing those results that you did versus also too the responsiveness you had towards parents and guardians and like which so it's almost like and we had Dr. Balkin was on the dissertation like well which one mattered more like
mhm.
was it the being responsive and so like hey I'm gonna because I would guess too, you got a bunch of Claire Fearn fans, like, wow, this teacher really like is being responsive to me, and like and if she's asking me to do something, I'm gonna do it, right, or I'm gonna engage in it. Versus if you're just getting sent things home and you're like, hey, this does not quite work and there's no adjustment, like
Mhm.
like, well, they're not listening to me, I'm not gonna listen to them. So I don't know what do you think? Like, I mean, you've had a little bit of time to reflect on that.
Yes. And I think, it is definitely interesting. And I know Dr. Balkin mentioned like, okay, well, what, if a different class had gotten that same parent teacher relationship would, it is, I guess it would be interesting. And I think I would want to do, like, it poses the potential for another study to look at to
Yeah,
see what is the implication of that engagement, of that relationship. Um, and I didn't, necessarily think of it because I was just like, oh, that's just the part of PDSA cycles. Like that's just,
yeah,
what a
yeah,
PDSA cycle is. Um, but I definitely think that yes, I'm curious if I also, I'm curious of like, was the script what was super beneficial or was it the relationship?
yeah,
And that feedback and that adjustment and that um component. I would hope that the script would be beneficial, and I think that it definitely showcased on that post test because I guess the post test the student was doing,
yeah,
the
yeah.
parent wasn't filling it out.
Right.
Uh,
I think it's
but
both. I would think it's both and, like
yeah.
it's because like if you're responsive and but your content sucks,
Hmm.
like okay, whatever, I'm gonna do everything. I'll do all this stuff, but it's not leading to anything. Versus like, no, it's good content, and I'm being responsive. Like it's like there's it's like you got two superpowers working in tandem,
Yeah.
and so in maybe it's both.
Because I was thinking, I'm like, okay, well, even if a teacher is responsive in a balanced literacy approach, well, it's not going to be beneficial to the spelling skills,
Yeah,
if they're saying, oh, this was, you know, this was a boring activity to write the spelling words 3 times each. And the parent or the teacher was like, okay, well, here, let's make it more engaging. Do jumping jacks or,
Yeah.
hop out the sound or hop
Right.
out the, or,
The syllables. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make it more exciting and more
Right.
thrilling, but not learning the skill.
Right.
Um, so.
And they might be get more at the like, and I think that's where the like some of those surprise words or mystery words that are coming out like, hey, do you actually know the skill versus like, did you just memorize? Right. And so that's good. It's good stuff.
Mhm.
All right.
Yes.
Um, anything else that you want to talk about with regards to your study before we get some closing questions here?
Trying to think. I think we covered everything. I just, will just reiterate, especially, some of the parent comments on the surveys would just share that um, their child was knowledgeable in the homework and the organization of the homework too. So when the parent or guardian was practicing blending or segmenting or using sound boxes, although they might not have, especially the first few weeks, they struggled with understanding what sound boxes were or how to segment a word into sounds. But the child did because we
Yeah.
did it every day in class. And
Yeah.
so I remember reading a comment that said, like, obviously the teacher's doing something right because my child knows how to do this. And I was like, I mean, yeah, okay,
There
good.
you
I'm glad
go.
my child can do it at home. Um, but that also reiterates, the importance of having, even if a parent or guardian's not super confident in a structured literacy approach, giving it a try at home allows the child that reinforcement of that practice at home.
Yeah.
Whereas, if I think, okay, well, how I taught spelling in the classroom was segmenting and blending sounds, and they would draw their sound boxes or tap out their sounds on their arm or, however they wanted to do it, or we would practice lots of different strategies of how to spell a word. But if they would just go home and their parent would say, okay, just spell this word, and they would just say the
10
letters,
times. Yeah.
yeah, they're not getting that skill reinforced.
Right.
And so even if the parent or guardian wasn't confident saying, okay, sound out, how many sounds do you hear in this word?
Yeah.
And the child can tap out the sounds.
Right.
That's just great reinforcement at home that they would not typically have gotten because a
Yeah.
parent or guardian wouldn't know to say, how many sounds do you hear in this word?
Yeah.
Um,
Versus
so
like trying to have a spelling bee with them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and be like, what's the origin of this word?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, I think that was a really big takeaway of um just to me showcasing the importance of this, of that as parents grew and understood more, I think that would open the door to huge success. But I was just grateful that parents and guardians were one even willing to do this because I know it seems a lot complicated. I mean, even when I was starting to learn the science of reading and structured literacy, I was like, wow, this is a lot. I was basically like teaching yourself, like teaching how to read again, like of
Yeah.
the sounds and how to accurately say the sounds. And um, so that was, yeah, definitely something I thought I was like, okay, this is important work of helping parents understand this.
Mike, I guess I had one more question. Like one was like because Mississippi's been in the news based off of their, the increase in literacy that's happening,
Mhm.
like some awesome stuff. Like anyone come to you be like, oh, is this why? Did anyone say that?
No, um,
Because that's what I was thinking. It's like I'm hearing these news and I'm like seeing like the passion and the knowledge and all the stuff that's going into what you're doing. Just I mean, you have some amazing tables in your that some of the professors on the
mhm.
committee were like, oh my gosh, this table's amazing. Where you're aligning the different skills with what was happening in UFly and the spelling word. Then like oh my, like, they were going crazy over. And I was like,
Yes.
wow, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. And if we, made fun of like my lack of knowledge on some of the vocabulary and whatnot. But I mean, it was like, and hearing that news and then seeing what you're doing, I was like, okay, this makes sense. What Claire's been talking about, this makes sense if this is what's happening across the state.
And it is, and I think it's almost like it's an invisibility. Like, I guess you don't really see it happening unless you're in a reading classroom and
Hmm.
knowing um the huge shift that has been made in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, and it's definitely like I'm very proud that Mississippi's finally getting that recognition of the hard work that teachers and administrators and everybody has put through, because it's a lot. The science of reading is a lot of knowledge. And for teachers to a lot of times learn about it on their own, like on their own time, is just showcasing how passionate, teachers are too. I know several teachers that are constantly getting professional development in the science of reading, and Mississippi provides amazing professional development for free for a lot of educators.
Yeah.
We're really blessed to be in a state that takes literacy so serious, and is a very research-based literacy state. And so yeah, so I think we are finally getting the recognition of all the hard work that
Yeah.
a lot of people have paved the way for teachers, coming up now. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of work to understand reading and to understand the foundations of reading as well. So and the science of reading goes more into just the foundations as well. It covers all the components of reading. And so that's, a whole different ball game. But uh, it is definitely exciting to see Mississippi getting recognized.
Nice. Very good. So we'll close out. We're gonna honor your time here. Appreciate you coming on. But hey, maybe you gave us a preview with an answer before. What is one music album you love to listen to? As you probably I've my midlife crisis was buying vinyl records, and so I've been into album buying lately. But anything, you got anything?
Well, I am a hardcore Swiftie, so I think besides, the lullaby playlist that I play for my 1-year-old child, I think my Spotify rap is mostly Taylor Swift. Now choosing an album of
Yeah,
hers is like
pick one. Yeah,
that is difficult to do. I don't know if I could do one. Um,
I got one.
you've got one?
Mine for Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah,
Folklore.
what is hers?
Be
Folklore.
folklore.
Oh. See, I love folklore, but I also I'm more of an Evermore kind of girl.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, I feel like Evermore was a very underrated album.
they're kind of like
Um,
cousins.
yeah, they
They're in
are.
that same kind of
Good album.
era. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, but Evermore kind of, I don't know, it connected with the book I was reading at the time. And so it like, I don't know, I just connected with it more. Um,
What was the book?
uh, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Okay.
It's very good. But it was very whimsical, kind of witchy vibes, and that's kind of what Evermore gave me. And so I just kind of really, I was like, this is like perfect timing. I'm really into this world, and I've got a soundtrack that goes with it now. Um, but
Nice.
we are, yeah, we're hardcore Swifties over here. We've got all of her CDs, albums, multiple copies of some albums because I couldn't decide on which color I wanted, so I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
bought one.
Yeah.
So,
Love it. Love it. What about anything else that you'd like to promote? Anything good you're reading lately? I know you like to read, but I don't know if you've had a lot of time to read lately.
I know, I'm actually excited. I've bought some new books to read because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can actually
Yeah, yeah.
for pleasure now.
That's
I've got
right.
some free time. Um, so I guess I am a huge Gilmore Girls fan as well. So I actually bought the third Gilmore Girl, which is
It's a
the
book? They're Gilmore Girl
oh,
books?
the woman who played Emily Gilmore in the series wrote a memoir, and it's called The
Ah,
Gilmore Girl. So that I bought that recently, so I'm excited to read that one.
got it.
Uh, just because I'm an avid. I watch it probably 2 times a year. It's one of my constantly on repeat shows. But I
It,
will say we have been binge watching a new show, which I've been telling everyone about. It's on Netflix. It's called The Residence.
yeah,
It's
oh, yeah.
oh, have
If
you
you're
watched it?
if you're a Glass Onion fan or
Yes.
yes, yes,
Yes.
love it.
Eyes Out,
Knives Out,
Only
yes.
Murders fan. it is your show to watch.
Yes.
We have the last episode to watch tonight, so we're really excited. And I'm still I still don't know really who did it. So I'm still,
Yeah. There's lots of twists and turns.
Yeah. So
That's
been taking up our evenings this week. So not technically a book, but
no, we'll take that
show.
too. I like it. Claire, thank you so much for spending time on Abbott on Planet. Appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, there's my conversation with Claire, and as we kind of peeked into at the end, she's a Swiftie, and she had her album that she was willing to share, Evermore, and I'm going to talk about my album of the episode, which I already alluded to, which will be Folklore. So, she's Swiftie, might as well be all Swifties today. So, yeah, Folklore is my favorite Taylor Swift album. I kind of liked some of the early stuff with the country sort of twang to it. Did like the 1989, obviously, it's kind of more poppy, but Folklore is kind of where I'm at. And there's 2 songs on there. I like Betty. My daughter likes Betty. I liked that she likes Betty. So kind of that we both like Betty. And then there's another one called Exile that features Bon Iver. And that was one of my Spotify rap songs for the year. For some reason, I got into a groove where I would just listen to that song on repeat over and over again, which might not be the best thing to do for someone's mood, but it was good for my writing, so I just did. And the famous story in the family is that I was listening to it and really getting into it, and I was listening to it loud, and I was sitting at the park like writing, and then some friends of the family came by and saw me, and I was like feeling the emotions of the song, and I had some like tears in my eyes. And they saw me, and they were wondering, like, was I okay? And I was like, no, man, just caught up with Exile and Bon Iver. So that might be a little bit too much sharing, but hey, it's my podcast, whatever. So that's the album of the episode, Folklore by Taylor Swift. All right, so that's going to wrap up this visit to Abbott on Planet. Show notes are available at abbottonplanet.com/episode 126. They'll have all those links that Claire was talking about with regards to structured literacy. So if you want to check those out, and we'll have other stuff that we mentioned there, along with the previews of the 2 albums of the episode. The one Folklore that I said, and then Evermore from what Claire said. So if you'd like to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, and review, and share this episode to help others find this content. Please review the podcast. If you're finding any value, wherever you get it, if you go and review it, I can't tell you how much that helps it. Or, put a little star rating, whatever is available on your podcast platform. Just greatly appreciate it. You can also subscribe to the email list to receive the Abbott on Planet dispatch for teaching resources and updates from Abbott on Planet. Anywhere you go to Abbott on Planet where it says join the email list, hit that. Answer a couple questions, and you'll get it the next time it comes out, which is usually about once a month. And if you want to engage any further, submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@abbottonplanet.com. Again, we like those a lot. People that have been sending us questions and send a mailing address, we can then send you an Abbott on Planet sticker. So, hey, that's there. Lastly, I'm always looking to collaborate with those leading others to love through teaching. If you have an event or opportunity, email me at joel@abbottonplanet.com or visit abbottonplanet.com/about to fill out the request a call form. Thank you for spending time on Abbott on Planet. Special thanks to Dr. Claire Fearn for sharing her time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.